Story 1: The Bethesda Cult. There I was, sweating in my uncomfortable seat, surrounded by the sounds of obnoxious and synchronized clapping. Todd Howe. Artie had just made his usual appearance on the annual E3 Gaming Expo stage. The crowd was anxious, awaiting their anticipated announcements, ready to possibly be disappointed myself. I wasn't at Expo enduring the claustrophobic mania for some video games. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy a good RPG every once in a while, but that wasn't my intentions on the day in question. I was focused on Howard's body language, the glare in his eyes, looking for any subtle off-movements, even his choice of dialogue. There's been something bugging me for some time now that I have a firm and dedicated belief for. Todd and the company of Bethesda are in fact a part of a secret cult. I know how crazy it sounds, but please just hear me out. Allow me to take you back to the traumatizing experience that started all of this. Orange, red, yellow. The leaves brought an offset of color to an otherwise gloomy autumn day. The season also happened to be the prefix to the disc that was held in my hands. Fallout 4. I was a little late at having my try at the game, as I picked it up around November of last year. Still, I was pretty excited to give it a go. It has gained a lot of popularity. After all, with the game in my PS for console, I recall myself sitting on my bed for hours on end. I was fully absorbed into the wasteland-filled virtual environment, forgetting about the spilled cup of cola on the floor next to my feet and the fallen slice of pizza on my bed sheets. The real world around me was ultimately non-existent. It wasn't until my controller died that reality peeked through again. I, however, only used this moment of clarity to freak out and quickly plug in a charging cable between my system and controller. I had to hurry and jump back into the Fallout universe. This is where I felt like I was worth something. This is where I didn't feel alone. Fallout 4 was a game where I could build, fight, and help people in need. The settlement crafting system pulled me in, allowing me to create houses out of resources I worked so hard for. Enemies that got in my way I would fend off, using practical weapons I made myself. On quests I found mutants and irritated hostiles, the likes of which led me to achievements. These accolades made me feel great and wanted in this made-up reality. Finally, something made life livable that didn't happen to be prescription or recreational drugs. My virtual ecstasy, however, came to an abrupt halt. I began noticing some things out of the ordinary, even for a game of fantasy. I'd see I'm up to these electronic terminals in the game and noticed some patterns. Whether I was in a shopping mart, a library, or a museum, the same word would pop up on the terminals, along with the rest of the text. I never really noticed until I saw it appear, even in multiples on some of the screens. The word that struck my attention was "and." Most wouldn't bat an eye at this. I mean, the game is set in a post-apocalyptic world, so the word "and" is rather fitting. For one reason or another, it didn't feel fitting to me at all. I see this word pop up all the time throughout my life. Everyone has that magic number that seems to follow them everywhere they go, whether it's the lucky number 7 or unlucky 13. Well, mine is the word "and." I see it inside gas stations, grocery stores, the daily newspaper, even on cereal boxes. This word is constantly being thrown at me. As soon as I started noticing this, I decided to look at one more terminal in the game. I came across one that was fairly easy to get to. There wasn't much disturbance, just some destroyed cars, no enemies in sight. This terminal didn't seem unusual at first, with the same common words lit up on the monitor. Then something obstructed the screen. The entire thing filled up with my least favorite word typed over and over. It sped up gradually, eventually to the point that my eyes couldn't keep up. I was wildly confused, wondering if this was just part of the video game. It was then that I turned off the game, not caring about where I was or when I last saved my progress. I was far too spooked to continue. Later that evening, I shared the experience with one of my close friends while hanging out at his house. I told him I finally gave the game a shot and mentioned what happened, hoping he wouldn't judge me and perhaps would know what I was talking about. My questions, to my dismay, were not answered. I've put hundreds of hours into Fallout and that isn't anything I have witnessed in my playthroughs, he stated. This led me to believe that I had simply played the game for so long that it had taken a toll on my mental state. Somehow this theory just made me feel worse walking back home that day. My phone kept ringing from all sorts of numbers, all of which I assumed were telemarketers. Considering I didn't recognize the numbers, I read them for a while, but there was one I decided to finally answer. Hello? I questioned in a cautious tone. Hey, this is GameStop. Your copy of Fallout for you ordered has arrived from the warehouse. You can come by and pick it up anytime. We're open till 9 p.m. today. I'll thank you. I responded in a confused fashion. I started answering more calls, my cell phone being bombarded with one new number after another. Perplexed would be an understatement of which to describe my mind at that point in time. Each phone call was from a different GameStop, at least a dozen or so from across the country, calling to tell me I had a copy of Fallout ready for pickup. At this point, I was more so frustrated than confused. I assumed my friend was playing some sort of prank at my EXP, and so I eventually began blocking the numbers as they came in. Despite knowing where the calls were more than likely coming from, something about the ordeal wasn't sitting well with me. To make matters worse, something far more peculiar happened upon opening the door to my home. I didn't walk through the doorway, no, not in the slightest. As soon as the front door opened, I found myself sitting on my bed, controller in hand, looking directly at my TV screen. It's tough for me to explain, but it felt as if I never left the house. The game itself was still running, stopped right where I left off, the word "end" plastered across the terminal screen and yet again multiplying rapidly. I shot up from my bed and unplugged both my television and PlayStation. I looked up and noticed something. Everything in the room was just how I left it, but the walls, they were undoubtedly different. The word "end" surrounded the perimeter of my bedroom, written in all different colors and sizes. At first I was outraged, wondering who had broken into my home and vandalized my room. I thought it might have been my friend pulling out all the stops to severely spook me. If so, it was working. This explanation fell flat when I realized that the word painted across my room was written in my own handwriting. But hold on, how does this make any sense? A harmless glitch, hallucinations, and writing on the walls. What does it all mean? Well, at this point I wasn't sure, but I knew I had to get to the bottom of it. Without a better plan in mind, I decided to go directly to the source, Todd Howard himself. And this is what brought me to a room full of boisterous clamor, waiting for the presentation to be over. I grew anxious sitting there, hoping I could speak with Mr. Howard. I didn't know what he'd say or if he'd even believe me, but I was a slave to my own wishful thinking. Perhaps he could explain all my worries away and put my mind at ease once and for all. Unfortunately for me, my issues couldn't be fixed with a patch or update. My heart racing, there finally came a time everyone left their seats. My legs were shaking, but that was mostly from sitting for such a long period of time. Just as I was about to stumble through the exit and head backstage, a man grabbed me by the arm and pulled me aside. It was none other than Todd Howard, in answer to my PR. "Hires about time, sir. We've been expecting you," he exclaimed. "You have?" "Of course. I've been waiting for you to get the hint to finally come join us. Just please don't tell anybody," he replied. "Join you for what?" "I'm gathering a number of people to help us at Bethesda to start a doomsday plan. I'm not at liberty to say why you or any of the others were chosen, but I can tell you that we are using Fallout as a net to capture those that can be of use to us. It also foreshadows what the world will look like in the near future. That's if, of course, you and the others are willing to join us. We can't do it on our own." "What would happen, hypothetically speaking, if I don't join?" "Well, you're free to do whatever you like, but the end has already begun. If you don't help us, someone will take your place, and I just know that you'll regret it. The clock is ticking." Mr. Howard handed me a business card, upon which was the text, "Pre-register for your spot on the end list today," along with a 1-800 number. I took the card and went back to my hotel room to get some rest and process everything. It'd be a nice way to relax and hopefully cope with the strange events occurring in my life. I would soon find that relaxation was nowhere within reach. Entering my room, anger and disorientation came over me. The TV in the hotel room was lit up with a copy of Fallout for playing. It was stuck on the same screen with the word "end" typed up all over it, just as it was back on that November day. As if this wasn't enough, my phone rang, though this time a number I recognized. "Hey, Dad, what's up?" I answered with, as I normally did when my father called. "Hey, I'm sorry to bother you during your trip, but I have some upsetting news to share with you. Your brother, he just passed away moments ago." "Wait, what? How?" I shouted out of shock and despair. I was never close to him. "Why, brother, with him always being away at war and whatnot, it sounds horrible, but it felt like he was more of a distant relative than a sibling. Even still, my heart sunk. The nurses aren't completely certain, but they claim radiation poisoning was at fault. I find that questionable, because no bombs have been dropped near his location. They're going to do further analysis in the coming week, too. Let us know. I'll be back in town as soon as possible. Please keep me updated if any other information comes up. I'm not sure how to handle this. I was just talking to him a couple days ago." I let out, along with a single tear of pure grief. "I will, son. This is just as hard for me and I'll be devastated for as long as this world lasts. He'll be looking down on us, Smee Ling. At least he's in a better place." My father said this in a tone of hurt and heartache. He then changed the subject, probably to lighten the mood a bit, something he awkwardly did to avoid dealing with more serious issues. "Hey, by the way, I have a piece of mail I found stuck in my door tonight. Pretty odd for a Sunday. It has my name on it, but I think it's for you. Says something about a Fallout 76 beta invitation and has the word end written all over it. Do you want it?" I hung up on my own father. I'm not sure why or how I found myself in this ongoing nightmare, but it's like I'm trapped in my own apocalypse. Take these words however you'd like, believe what you want. But Bethesda is not a game company. Todd Howard is up to something, and this is the start of the end. Story 2. Trick or treat. Fat chance. Really, you probably don't want that responsibility. And even if you did take it upon your shoulders to track them down, you can't single-handedly stop the children, their manipulators are not on the grid. Whoever engineered this is in control of the world on a very disturbing level. This is what I want you to do. Read these pages, if they're still legible, and take what you will from them. Don't go on a wild goose chase, and realize that when you find this book that it will not be in the place where I left it. They'll move it somewhere else to deceive you. I've left my mark on a tree there. Only then, when you see my name, will you know this is the place. You may have even heard of it in the history books. But be assured, any rumors on Wikipedia or Google pages that you pull up will be guesswork at best. None of them are even close to the truth. When you find the place, there may already be another town just like it. That's what I'm trying to stop. If we're not successful, then just realize, above all things, that evil exists. I'm not talking about bad people or tragic accidents. I'm talking real intel. Ancient evil. It is calculated, and it is always one step ahead of you. Should you decide to take my place and become the paragon to prevent the corruption of the hearts and minds of children, I think who in advance I told you that I'm human. I lie. I used to be, before All Hallows Eve on that fateful night. I've been alive since then, far longer than any human being, and the reason is because I love children. I've always loved them in their purity and their innocence. That's why I was taken in by their ruse. That's why I finally decided to put all this down, sent to rise later. I won't be here much longer, and someone has to take up the burden. I've waited until I saw them return. They'll be back this year. They're planning the same thing again, and I can't stop them again. I can't expect that much from you, but I'm only giving you all this so you'll believe me. I have to be believable. If you think I'm crazy, you'll throw this in a garbage can, and more people will disappear. It's time to tell you what happened. I'm rambling. Back then, All Hallows Eve was the time for evil's ascension. You've all forgotten. If you left your house on that night in the old country, you were a devil worshiper. Halloween was not the term we used. We fled to the shores of this country because we were persecuted for our lifestyle choices. We were shipped nature, the changing of the seasons, the solstice of spring, autumn, winter, and summer. In the purest sense of the word, we were druids. Our names and accents were English. but we were servants of the earth. We were some of the first to celebrate it as a holiday. The natives here were puzzled by our behavior, but also frightened by it, and so they left us alone. They misunderstood we were an OT the ones to be afraid of at the time. I was relieved. They'd attacked us in our settlements time and time again, but as it drew closer to the end of October, they stayed a while. Why? Maybe in their own noble bonds with the earth and soul. They knew something terrible was on the horizon. They were right. John Hunter's little boy wanted to be a native with a bow and arrow and a real headdress. Little Mary Taylor made a dress that was crafted after the local schoolhouse teacher's prettiest outfit. She idolized her educator, of course. They all had their get-ups. They were the first trick-or-treaters in what was to become the United States of America 150 years later. We sent them out to frolic about the settlement, collecting apples and tarts and oaths are sweet things into their burlap goodie bags. They were no Snickers or Milky Ways, and yet the magic of this holiday held no less sway over them than it does the youth of our current time. They dress up as the Joker, the Power Rangers, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. These children were their predecessors. I sent my daughter with Mary and John Hunter, Jr., despite our mistrust and wariness of the Anglican Church and the monarchs that presided over it. My little girl was dressed as the Queen of England. I refused to crush her fantasy world, and so I simply indulged at her. We heard promises to return after sundown, to say yes, ma'am, and no, sir, and not to linger too long if they were invited inside the households of our community. We didn't realize that the house on the edge of the settlement existed until we saw the children go inside. There were no lanterns or sources of light in the windows. No fire or harvest dolls on the outside of the dwelling. As we sat in the middle of the town hall, imbibing in the pleasures of distilled moonshine, none of you will ever make it as potent as we did in those days amongst our brethren. We Washington, our young ones gravitate across the middle of our town to the foreboding household that had seemingly been constructed overnight. When we gazed upon it, it seemed as though the place were S.H. Emmering. It pained my vision to look upon the building, as if my senses were being forced and propelled in another direction. Such a thing is difficult to put into words, but I seemed to be the only one who realized that our kids were all heading to the same place. When I questioned John Hunter as if something were odd about their actions, he stared at me as if I were insane. What do I mean? He asked. There's no house there. They're going to play by the stockades. The sun had set by that point, but as I said before, none of them were concerned. The natives hadn't shown. And up for weeks, I decided to walk to the phantom dwelling that only I and the children could see, to peer inside and see who these new settlers were, and White call to the youths as if it were a black hole. In a sea of stars, I tried to stand outside, to look through the window, but when I saw what was happening, it was too late. I breached the doorway with my buck knife drawn, but there was nothing about the things inside that I could harm with a weapon. There's something deep inside of us, something embedded within the human spirit, that's perfectly aware when we encounter something truly terrible, fear, horror, evil, revulsion. It all hits you in a spastic wave, like a fierce exploding bullet that shatters the innermost parts of your soul with a relentless and powerful fool. I saw it in that moment, standing in that darkened doorway. They weren't people, and they weren't spirits. They were halfway there, lingering over the unconscious bodies of my Dot and her peers in their hooded black robes of half-existence. There was one, in particular, who made me feel as though my eyes would pop like ripened cherries when I stared at it. It was the leader, the source of that tug, that pull, and it was slowly fading, disappearing like a gaseous black cloud of death through my little girl's nostrils and mouth. She was gasping for air, as if every breath after the one that preceded it were filled with acid, as if she were hungry for real, fresh air in her small lungs. With every breath, the figure faded deeper into age. Along with the rest of them, I wish I could say that I was a hero, and that I hacked them all to bits. I wish I could say that I saved the day and made Halloween a night when the worst thing that children have to worrying about is poison candy. It didn't happen. There was one of them left, floating toward me on elongated, blackened tendrils of shimmering nothingness. By all real means of my imagination, it shouldn't have been there, but it was, and soon it was going inside of me. The last thing I saw were their little feet, scurrying out of the phantom house and into the town. I felt that something terrible was about to happen. I had no idea. Everything went black, and then I was outside of myself. I was conscious, but observing my feet, my hands doing things beyond my own scope of physical control. They led me and our children into our meeting hall where, of course, the kids were embraced by the open, loving arms of their parents. I witnessed the betrayal, the brutal moments in which the truth instilled by the love for family and offspring would transform into a cause for the destruction of our village. They absorbed them. There is no better adjective for what happened. One moment they were there, and seconds later they were nothing but dark essence filtering in through the eyes and noses and mouths of their devil children. It was over in minutes. A night that should have been a celebration of nature, of the seasons, had turned into the end of everything that we knew and loved here in our new land. I started to fight it, the kids knew, the moment I began to resist, to try and reclaim my limbs and mind from the corrupting influence within. Their heads snapped back from their feast of souls to survey me in my struggle. My daughter's eyes were sunken, black pools of the abyss, devoid of any emotion, any semblance of the bright-eyed stare that she once held for me in all her love and adoration. For father, I missed at the most, really, the way she'd run to me when I came in from the fields every evening as the sun went down. I lived for that. What reason do I have to live now other than to find her and stop them? I'm incapable. That falls on you, my friend. They took the part of my daughter that counts, the part that I loved and cherished, and turned her into a servant. You ask me why I'm still alive, and again, it's because I love her so very, very much. Her body is a hollow shell, filled with the malefice and blackness of evils beyond our world. The black-robed things have grown as centuries have passed. They are from some place that is not of this world, but their urgency, their hunger to devour and destroy is insatiable. It's an exponential, amplifying contagion on mankind, and All Hallows Eve is their pinnacle, their Christmas. I've done my best to warn you throughout history, to leave my mark in places where their desolation has left nothing but dust on the wind and empty houses, a deserted football field and a Texas ghost town. a card room in the back of a nightclub in Chicago, right under the nose of civilization, Roanoke Island, North Carolina, before John Rolfe found it. In the aftermath, the thing that I expelled through sheer force of will alone has left me with an unusually long and empty life, devoid of anything but my desire for revenge. I have failed. I'm pleading with you. October 31st is not long away. My little girl, or what's left of her, is going to lead them to the same place. It's been refounded, except now it hums with sport, utility vehicles, and cell phones. I don't want this to happen to your child. Go to Roanoke and stop them from repeating the ritual. Those bodies they inhabit now are frail. On their way out, it's been almost 500 years. They'll need new ones on this Halloween. Look for a building that appears as though it shouldn't be there. It will be across from that very tree where I signed my name, where I made my mark. I changed my title, named myself after the tribe of natives who knew it was coming, who, perhaps, tried to warn us, but for some reason we failed to heed or recognize their warnings. They were more closely attuned to the earth than us, and yet they were still wiped out. Eventually, trick or treat, go no. W. You don't have much time. Croton. Story 3. Ghost Lights. I grew up in a small town in the Midwest. Now, when I say that it's a small town, I mean other people from my state have never even heard of it. That being said, for such a small town, it actually has a pretty dark history. In 1927, my hometown was a small village with a population of just over 300 people. The largest employer in the area, the Macmillan Textile Factory, had been built in 1922. The location was ideal because of all the available land and the town's close proximity to the state capital. By 1927, the factory employed 314 people from the surrounding area. May 25th, 1927 started early, just like every other day, and the workers looked forward to the start of a productive summer. But at 8:45 a.m., the north wing of the building exploded. Shortly after the explosion, a man named Arthur Rentschler, the disgruntled former employee, arrived on scene. He had loaded down his pickup with dynamite and scrap pieces of metal from his farm. Eyewitnesses said he stepped out of the truck holding a rifle. When the floor manager approached him, he fired into the bed of the truck, which said the dynamite to detonate. The explosion of the truck killed Rentschler, the manager, and a few other bystanders. The fire department found another 500 pounds of unexploded dynamite rigged up in the basement of the building and discovered that Rentschler had killed his wife and burned down his home. Investigators also discovered a sign on the property that read, "Criminals are made, not born." In the following weeks of investigation, witnesses came forward making claims that Rentschler had been complaining about a recent tax spike in order to pay for the new area school, and it was further discovered that his farm was in foreclosure. Investigators speculate that the combination of him losing his job and the tax increase may have been the catalyst for the bombing. When all was said and done, 44 people lost their lives. The news covered the bombing heavily, and in the weekend following the attack, some 50,000 people drove through the town just trying to catch a peek of the carnage. Unfortunately, the story rapidly fell to the wayside due to Charles Lindbergh's transatlantic flight that took place 2 days later. as quickly as it happened. The tragedy and its victims were forgotten, but they don't want to be forgotten. They want us all to remember. And on a balmy summer night in 2008, I learned not to forget. It was the summer before my senior year, and I had been staying at my friend Mike's house for the better part of a week. One night, after what felt like our 1000th match of Halo 3, I was video gamed out. I took off my headset, set the controller down, and looked at Mike. He was furiously rubbing his eyes, which, if they felt anything like mine, were on fire. Do you want to go outside for a little bit? I asked. Dude, I thought you'd never ask. Mike replied with a grin. It's like the AM though. Where are we gonna go? I really don't care. I just can't look at the TV anymore. Right now, we decided to take a walk through town. Neither of us planned on doing anything nefarious, but we both agreed that we needed some fresh air. As we walked down the dirt road Mike lived on, we laughed and talked about girls, cars, the rapidly approaching football season, and all the types of things you'd expect from two high school seniors. We walked past the high school, the town's only gas station, and then down Main Street. As we walked in front of our small town's only bar, a few girls that had graduated our freshman year stumbled out into the street. Mike and I tried our hardest to talk a big game and impress these girls, but just as you'd imagine, neither of them could have cared any less. Sure that we'd just ruined our only chance of any entertainment for the night, we decided to head back to his house. Our return route had us walking past the site of the old Macmillan factory, and then eventually would put us in front of the town small cemetery. As we walked in front of the old factory grounds that had since been converted to a small park, Mike spoke. Why do you think he did it? Mike asked, suddenly breaking the silence. I turned to look at him. Why, who did what? Rentler. Why do you think he blew up the factory? You know the story just as well as I do. He was pissed about losing his job and his farm. Pretty straightforward, dude. No way, there had to be more to it than that. People lose their jobs every day. If I had to guess, it was demonic possession, or maybe he was just insane, Mike said. Factly. I didn't really believe that demons had a hand in the disaster, but I felt a chill run down my back anyway. I looked ahead, saw that we were quickly approaching the town's small cemetery. And felt that chill intensify. Most of the victims had been buried in that cemetery before their families backed up and left town. And with the way our conversation had turned, I wanted to be as far away from it as possible. Let's cut through the cemetery, Mike said. It'll cut our walk in half if we go through it. I turned quickly to look at Mike. Are you insane? I'm not walking through a graveyard at 3 a.m. That's when Mike said it. The one sentence that will convince a 17-year-old boy to do just about anything. Don't be such a pussy, dude, I groaned and said, damn it. Okay, let's do this. Mike grinned at me before taking a large, exaggerated step off the main road and into the cemetery. I quickly followed suit, and soon we found ourselves deep in the cemetery. The cemetery itself is laid out like a giant sideways H, and as such is near impossible to get lost in. Or so I thought. As we walked, I began to notice that the area was completely devoid of sound, save for our feet scraping on concrete. Our ears should have been being assaulted by the sound of crickets and spring peepers, but instead we were completely engulfed in silence. I turned back to look at the main road we had entered from. It looked impossibly far away, much further than it should have. I turned back to Mike. Hey, shouldn't we have hit the turn yet? I thought so. Maybe the dark is just throwing us off. Let's keep going. We'll either find the turn or hit the wood line. We walked for another few minutes. When I thought I saw a light moving ahead of us, I strained my eyes in the dark, trying to figure out what I was seeing. Do you see that light up there? I asked in a hushed whisper. Mike stopped and looked ahead. I think so. It kinda looks like a flashlight. Yeah, that's it. Is someone really out there in the woods? It's probably a ghost light, Mike said with a shrug. Just stay on the path and we'll be fine. What the shit? A ghost light? What are you talking about? I asked. I stopped and waited for Mike to face me. What the hell is a ghost light? Mike stopped and turned to face me. He now stood between me and the tree line, and I could only make out the light if I leaned left or right. There's a few different versions of the story, but the one I've heard the most is the lights show up as a way to lead you off the trail or pathway in a cemetery. Once you've stepped off the trail, you're in their domain, he said as he gestured to the tombstones on either side of us. Sometimes the lights lead you to bodies, sometimes to some kind of treasure, and other times the lights will lead you to your death. I shivered and swallowed hard. I leaned a little to the right hand so that the light looked closer, or at least bigger. I looked back at Mike. Let's get the hell out of here. It looks like that light is getting closer. Mike turned to look at the light. We both gasped when we realized that not only was the light closer than when we originally saw it, but it was moving straight towards us and picking up speed. I tried to run, but I felt like I was cement. Head to the ground, the light moved in a straight line. It didn't bounce or move like someone carrying a flashlight. It just shot straight at us. Mike grabbed my arm and snapped me out of my trance as he ran by. Fucking run. I turned and started to run and soon realized that I had stepped off the path and was now sprinting parallel to the road between the tombstones. I looked to my left and saw that Mike was running in the same direction, a few rows of tombstones from me. Mike, run to the road, I screamed out. Mike acknowledged me by changing direction mid-stride, but suddenly he dropped. Mike, I yelled as I changed direction and charged towards my friend. As I approached where he had gone down, I saw him holding the right side of his face and frantically scrambling to his feet. Leave me, dude. Just go, he panted. No way. Come on, I yelled as a bright light was beginning to fall all around us. I threw his arm over my shoulder and half ran, half carried him a few more yards before my foot caught the corner of a low headstone. Mike grunted loudly as we crashed into the damp grass. I frantically rolled over and covered my face. The light had become so blindingly bright I could no longer keep my eyes open. I felt my body tense up as the light washed over us, and then nothing. I felt nothing. I had yet to open my eyes, but I could feel my feet planted firmly on the ground. I slowly opened my eyes and looked around. To my right, Mike was doing the same. What the fuck was that? Mike asked. I scanned around and realized that we were back at the front of the cemetery. I looked over at Mike, who was no longer bleeding from his face, before looking down at my watch. It read 5:30 a.m. Somehow 2.5 hours had passed from when we had originally entered the cemetery. I don't know, man. I think we just got chased by a ghost. I mean, I didn't make that up, right? Mike shook his head. No, that definitely just hop. I followed Mike's gaze and gasped when I noticed a man in denim coveralls standing next to the closest tombstone. The man had an almost disgusted look on his face. What felt like an eternity passed as we stared at one another. Finally, the man spoke. "Why have you forgotten us? Why has everyone forgotten us?" Behind the man I saw silhouettes materializing and moving closer to us. "Please, tell our story. Don't let them forget," the man said as he began to fade from view. One by one the silhouettes behind him faded as well, and before long Mike and I were left standing there, mouths agape. Mike, clearly the braver of the two of us, walked back into the cemetery and looked down at the tombstone the man had been standing next to. Robert Amos, born September 9th, 1897, died May 25th, 1927. Mike read slowly before looking up at me. Even in the dark I could see that the color had drained from his face, and he quickly rejoined me on the road. Neither of us spoke of the incident for months. Both of us avoided the cemetery like the plague, that is, until Community Day. The week before homecoming, the football team adopted the cemetery for Community Day, and we were expected to go as a team to clean up headstones and take up trash. There was no real way to get out of it, so Mike and I begrudgingly went. The day went surprisingly smoothly, and I had dearly forgotten about the ghost lights and apparitions until I moved near where Mr. Amos was buried. I didn't see anything or anyone, but I swear I heard a voice whisper, "Remember us." It's been almost a decade since we saw the ghost lights. But everywhere I go, I make sure to tell the story of the Macmillan Textile Factory. A tragedy like that should never be forgotten, and neither should the innocent people that lost their lives. Story 4. USS February. Radio waves have traveled through and past the Earth's atmosphere for decades. They carried snapshots of humanity out into infinity. Music, broadcasts, TV shows, news commentary. It was all out there, racing away at the speed of light. The antenna from the USS February's lifeboat angled itself automatically, detecting a signal from one of the sectors within its reach. The ship's computer extrapolated the data and converted it to an audio signal. It concluded that it was merely old data from long ago. Per protocol, it routed the signal through the ship's comm system for its occupant to assess. The signal emerged through the distortion, and a song began to play throughout the bulkheads and corridors of the small vessel, hanging on here until I'm gone, right where I belong. Just hanging on, the tiny lifeboat drifted through space at half the speed of light. The last survivor of the USS February watched as the small blue dot grew larger in the forward viewport, having spent weeks to travel the distance. If it were not for thoughts of a wife and beautiful daughter, Madden S. would have prevailed. We were heralded as heroes, and all of mankind bid us farewell when we were shot into the emptiness of space 254 days ago. 20 men and women sent from all nations were ambassadors of humanity with a message of peace and goodwill, even though an answer Watched you come and go to the voice that call. Head out from the void. How was I to know you'd steal the show? An intelligent mind telling us we were not alone. The whole world will remember the day we heard the transmission originating past Mars. Within the asteroid belt, it came from a small dwarf planet, now glowing in the dark. The lights of Ceres brightened in anticipation. One day I'll have enough to gamble. I left my wife and little girl to make them proud. I'll wait to hear your final call. Soon humanity would never be the same again. Bet it all. We were wrong. We were so wrong. We done. T belong out here. Hanging on, we found the signal source. Here until I am gone, under the planet's crust. Right where I belong, human noise, just hanging on a set. Lament a colony, long dead and gone, even though it was tens of thousands of years old. Past this time alone, frozen in ice. Somewhere so unknown, it heals the soul, the remnants of a society. Dead for centuries, there was no one here alive who could have sent that message. A small portion of the alien site was exposed and free from the ice. Recent seismic activity and hot gases from the planetoid's core melted away a section, allowing entry into the structure. We donned our pressure suits and anxiously made our way into the depths of the cavern. We would be the first to lay eyes on the remains of an alien culture. They weren't much different from us. They were an artistic people and adorned the walls and buildings with pictures and imagery of a strange and faraway home world that looked so much like us. What we found frozen in the ground was not like us. We found an ancient, mangled machine. Lined along its structure were artistic depictions of the device displayed side by side. We-to-do. CD, it was their environmental system. It was the source of their heat, air, and water. We followed the trail of beautifully rendered portraits giving hints of the machine's functio, NS, and abilities. Each work of art was more stunning than the next. We came to the last image and stood there stunned. This final picture seemed to show them detonating an explosive and destroying this vital machine themselves. An indentation in the smooth, frozen ground caught our attention. Through the ice, we could see a shape. It was fleshy and looked as if 2 bodies were fused into one. Each of its limbs was contorted and deformed. Arms were long and bent at odd and abnormal angles. Teeth protruded from mouths that didn't belong. Pupils from eyes that shouldn't to be there stared back at us. It was a mockery to the harmony of nature. It was an abomination towards the symmetry and beauty of life. The cavern was unstable from the continuous seismic activity. The only relic of true value within reach was this thing frozen in the ice. With plasma torches in hand, we raced to cut it out of the ground and carry it back to the February with our payload safely stowed aboard. We prepared for our journey home. The cave had been there for centuries. Maybe it was our cutting, or the ship landing on the crater's surface, or a combination of both. But the foundation below the crater began to collapse. With the cavern, we barely managed to lift off. We were so busy congratulating ourselves on our narrow escape that never bothered to check in on our new cargo. It had begun to thaw. What we unleashed was malicious and cruel and had only one goal: to consume us and make us part of it. It picked us off one by one in secret. It absorbed IT's victim, mimicking them in every way. There was no way to tell who was still human and who had been replaced. Paranoia overcame us. No one could be trusted. Every part of this thing, all the way down to the cellular level, was sentient and could infect a viable host. The larger organisms would attack with a primal rage and captured its prey. Still alive, the victim would struggle and scream in agony as the creature absorbed them. In less than an hour, a slab of flesh would break off from its body and begin to develop in form. Soon, it would look and act exactly like the person it had devoured. The smaller particulates of the creature would lie within the body like a microbe. It secretly absorbed and devoured the flesh and tissue from the inside. The host, unaware of its presence, it would only reveal itself if threatened or given an opportunity to propagate itself. It would emerge in an explosion of flesh, blood, tentacles, and tendrils, teeth and claws. In less than 24 hours, there were only 6 of us left. We cowered on the bridge in despair. We mourned for what needed to be done. We knew it was only a matter of time before it overcame us. You could not risk bringing it back with us. We knew we could never return home. Humans were not capable of piloting a starship at the speeds obtained by the February. Complex course adjustments and corrections needed to be performed instantaneously. Interstellar navigation was under computer control, and we were locked into a course for Earth in 2 hours. The ship's main sea computer would perform a course correction to avoid one of the many uncharted asteroids in this sector. If an overload occurred in 3 of the auxiliary power distribution nodes, the central computer would crash, taking down the ship's navigational controls. In the time it would take for a full system reboot, the window for a course adjustment would have passed, and 30 minutes later we would impact the asteroid's surface, traveling at 24.0 miles per hour. The captain stood over me, handing me tools before I climbed down the air shaft and squeezed into the claustrophobic maintenance duct, barely wider than the width of my shoulders. The tube would open into a secondary airlock junction. From there I could access a service port and emerge behind the computer's secondary cooling unit and blow the power nodes. I started to descend into the dark below. A crash from overhead sounded, and the bridge went dark. The backup lights flashed from emergency strobes that illuminated a sieve and formless shape in brief glimpses between bursts of light and dark. The thing was covered with thin, worm-like tendrils that shook and rattled with a seizure-like intensity. The tendrils shot out from its body like arrows, piercing everyone within its range. A tendril punctured the back of the captain's head with incredible force and emerged from her forehead, spraying me with our blood. It branched out quickly over her head and face, re-entering her flesh through her skin, eyes, and mouth. I sealed the service hatch, putting as much distance between me and the screams of pain and agony. Having disabled the power nodes, I made the decision I did not need to die here. It was just me, no one else to worry about, no one to fear that they might have a monster hidden within their blood. It was safe for me to take the escape shuttle and go home. I departed the February and watched it impact the asteroid in a magnificent flash of light. I caught sight of my reflection in the viewport glass and saw the blood on my face begin pool together and disappear under my skin. paralyzed by terror. The realization hit me hard. I had been deceived. I waited for it to start feasting on my flesh. I waited for it to tear and shred the parts of me that make me who I am. I waited for the end. It never came. It screamed in my head, wanting to know what I was, and how could I resist its attempts to consume me? The truth was I didn't know. Something about me was different and capable of hindering its ability to assimilate me. Yes, I could resist it, but I could not overcome it. My body had reacted violently to its trespassing. I had severely weakened it, but slowly it began to overwhelm whatever unique gift I had that opposed it. The fingers on my right hand began to elongate, and slits appeared on my knuckles, with crimson irises peeking out from underneath. While I slept, it disabled the communication relay, preventing me from warning Antarctic control about the coming danger I was carrying. While it slept, I disabled the ship's wireless receiver. It wanted to know why I had done this. I buried my secret deep in my mind and thought only of my wife Melissa and my daughter Kylie. It had complete control of my right side, and I had to restrain my right arm with a belt strap to prevent it from attacking myself. A distorted mouth was forming on my stomach. Wet lips were emerging from my skin and separating from each other. Open sores with the weeping faces of my crewmates screamed and let out the most frightening moans of anguish and torment from my body. Soon the orbital docking station came into view, orbiting high above Earth. This game of King of the Mountain between the two of us had come to an end. It was time for us to make our final move. The shuttle began to position itself to start its approach towards the docking module. The thing surged in growth and dominance over my body. It craved and desired the new flesh it was about to encounter. To its surprise and rage, I taunted it with a secret it was unable to scrape out of my mind. While it knew everything about me, I was starting to get images about it. I began to understand it. I could see where it came from and what its purpose was. Most of all, and most importantly, I saw its arrogance and pride. It be asked in its self-perceived superiority. It was so focused and enraged at being mocked. It took no notice of the message flashing on the display: communication error, interlock allig, NMENT failure, docking approach terminated, alert, abort. By disabling the wireless receiver, remote docking was not possible. It would have to be done manually. You ask for walls. I'll build them higher. I created a mental barrier to keep it at bay. We'll lie in shadows of them all. It clawed and beat at the mental wall, rapidly tearing it down. I de-stand, but they're much too tall. I kept it distracted until it was too late. Manual controls engaged, and I fall. I took back control of my body, ignited the thrusters, and sent the ship into a nosedive into the Earth's atmosphere. February stars. The ship streaked across the sky, floating in the dark, illuminating the night. Temporary scars and aspiration. It ripped through my skin and shattered my bones. February stars. The ground approached with frightening speed. Floating in the dark, the hull was engulfed in flames. Why scars? The heat was searing and blistering. February stars. Feb. ZZTT.ARS. Melissa, you were my best friend and my soulmate. We were always meant to be with each other. FL.ZZZTTTTN ZZTTT dot he dark. Kylie, I am sorry I won't be there to see you grow up. Temp.ZZZTTTTT dot ARS. But if you look up in the night and see a star burning in the dark, that will be me. I am always with you. Fed.ZZZZTTTTT. Daddy loves you. ZZZZTTTT. February Stars written by the Foo Fighters. Story 5, The Chosen One. I was about 8 years old when it all started. I was always a quiet child, never wanted to be the center of attention. My mother, on the other hand, was a happy, loud woman with so much power inside of her, and she was never afraid to show it. I've never met my father and don't know who he is, but I never felt like I was missing out on something. It was one day in summer that I found it in our backyard. It was a small box made out of wood. The strange thing about it is that it was sealed, and it had all kinds of patterns burned on it. This box is the reason why I am where I am now, but we'll come to that later. I took the box with me. It was so beautiful with all those patterns, and I didn't think about anything bad when I took it home with me. I put it beside my bed and left it there. But as soon as this thing was in my house, my nightmares started. Every single night I would wake up screaming at the top of my lungs, bathed in my own sweat. I would dream of monsters and creatures that would eat me alive, tear me or my mother into pieces. The end of the world, ghosts and demons. There was no night without a nightmare, and that went on for more than a month. I wasn't able to sleep anymore. I hated sleeping more than anything else. My mother would sleep beside me every night. She even tried bringing me to a doctor. But I was a healthy child. Nothing was wrong with me. One night everything changed. I was about to go to bed, laid down and fell asleep very fast. That night I didn't have a nightmare. No, that night I was about to find out why I was having all these nightmares the nights before. That night I dreamt about the box. It appeared in my dream. I still remember it very well. I was in a room and everything was white. There were no windows, no door, nothing except for white walls. In the middle of the room was the box. I was seeing myself in my dream, wearing a black long dress, standing in front of the box. I was looking down at it, smiling. The box started to turn itself and glow. All of a sudden I heard screams, loud, awful screams. I got scared and held my ears shut with my hands, closing my eyes. Seconds after, the screaming stopped and the box opened. I opened my eyes and my ears and bent over to see what was inside. In this moment, a strange kind of dust came flying towards me. I inhaled it and felt a strong burning inside my lungs. The burning and went into my brain, making me fall to the ground. The screaming started again. I laid there on the floor, not able to move. My eyes were closed, my ears ringing. A few seconds after I opened my eyes, the screaming stopped, and what I saw then was the most beautiful thing I have ever seen or will ever see in my entire life. I was not laying in the room anymore. I was somewhere else, somewhere not on planet Earth. The waters were blue and clear. The birds were loud and bigger than normal. The grass was smooth and the sun was shining on my body, making me feel warm. The sky was not blue. It was the kind of orange, red sky you only see when you watch the most beautiful sunsets. I was feeling free and happier than ever. The time I spent there was soon over because I woke soon after. It was time to wake up. This was the last time in my life I had a good night of sleep. I was sure that I had to open the box. I wanted to go there, to this other place. This day I too. Okay, the box outside. With me I took a hammer. I was preparing myself to open the box when I heard a strange noise coming out of it. Seconds after, the box was turning and glowing in a dark red. I was afraid, but I remembered my dream the night before and took all my courage. Then the screams began. These screams were so loud in my ears, so awful to hear, that they didn't stop like in my dream. They went on, screaming so loud, louder and louder every second. I closed my ears and tried to stay calm. The box opened up and I bent over. I wanted to go to that place so bad, but there was no dust coming out of it. There was something else. What I saw then will always be burnt in my memories. There was blood in the box. It was full of dark blood. The blood formed itself into something like a snake and started to come towards me. I stood there in shock. The blood started to come up my leg, going higher and higher. Wherever the blood went, I felt burning. It burned like hell, and it was hell, the beginning of my own personal hell. When the blood reached my face, it started to go into my eyes. I was not able to move. My eyes burned and every last drop of the blood went into them. The last thing I remember from that day is that I fell to the ground. I woke up in a hospital. There were monitors all around me. Where was I and why was I there? I opened my eyes quickly and tried to move myself, but I had no strength at all. I soon heard someone coming in. It was my mother, but why did she look so different? She looked so much older. When she came, she started crying and hugged me tight. I lifted my head and looked at my arms. Why were they so big? I tried to talk, to ask all those questions I had. It was hard. My voice was very weak. Mom, what happened? I asked. The second I said that, I realized that my voice was deeper. Not much deeper, but kind of deeper. Honey, don't worry, I will tell you everything later. You need to rest now. Lay down. The doctors have to make some tests. She answered fast and went away so the doctor could come and check me out. He looked at the monitor, back at me, moved my arms and my legs, told me to say different things to see if I was functioning, and I was. After they made all those tests, I was able to talk to my mother. She sat down beside me and started talking. Omnia, my dear, this will not be easy for you. Tell me, what do you remember last? I started thinking. I was thinking long. My answer was simple. I don't know, Mom, and I really didn't know. I knew if I told her about the blood, she would not believe me, and that is all I could remember. I did not know anything else. Honey, do you know how much time has passed? Do you know how old you are? She asked. I remembered that I was 8 years old when it happened, but I knew I was bigger now. I just shook my head. Omnia, you are not 8 years old anymore. In fact, very much time has passed. You are 15 years old, honey. You were in a coma for more than 7 years. They all said that you would never wake up, but I knew you would. I was 15 years old. I lost 7 years of my life. How could that happen to me? We talked about many more things. She explained what happened when I was gone. In the end, I had to stay one more day in the hospital. My mother went home after I made her do it. She wanted to stay, but I wanted to be alone. I needed time to process everything. I got up on my own and walked for the first time in 7 years. The weird thing was that I was able to do all of this, walk, talk, everything I should have forgotten while I was in a coma. I did not. That night was the first night I knew that very thing would change. I went to the bathroom and looked in the mirror. I saw myself the first time after 7 years. And when I saw that my dark hazel eyes were not hazel anymore but blue, and my hair as not blonde anymore but a dark brown, and my skin was pale like snow, but my lips were as red as blood, I started to cry like I was still 8 years old. I was not myself anymore. I fell to the ground and wept for what felt like ages. Then I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned around and saw a woman beside me. She was no nurse because she wasn't dressed like one. I didn't know her, but S.H. He sat down beside me and looked me straight into my eyes. "You are the one," she simply said. I looked at her confused, my face wet from my tears. "Omnia, I want to go home now. I was waiting for so long. I waited for you to wake up, and now it's time for me to go home." I knew what I had to do, even though I was confused like never before in my life. I took her hand and stood up. He stared at each other for a long time. She was smiling and I felt like I was ready. I just knew that I was ready to bring her home. She walked off me, and then I felt pain like I never felt in my life. Before I felt death, I felt her death. She bled out, just as her body drained out of blood, mine did too. I felt everything, every drop that came out of my body, until the very last second, and that was the first person I brought to the other side. Many years have passed since then. I saw them everywhere. Ghosts of people who died and want to pass through me. Souls who want to go to the oath. Aside, I am now 25 years old. I feel death every single day. In the beginning, there were only good people. But just like in our world, there are also bad people on the other side. But it's getting harder and harder. There are demons that want to pass me to come into our world. They are strong. Sometimes I feel like they are stronger than I am. But it's my job to hold the door. LOSED. I now understand what I am and how everything works. I will explain it to you all, and I hope you will never be the chosen one. If you listen to me very carefully, there is always one chosen one in our world. When the last chosen one dies or decides to die, a new one is coming. To become the chosen one, the blood of the dead chosen one has to get into your system. As the chosen one, you only have one job. You keep the door shut for those who want to come to our world and open the door for those who want to pass on to the other side. Not everyone can be the chosen one. You all know my name by now. It's Omnia. Do you know what Omnia means? It's Latin and it means everything. And that is exactly what you have to be able to become the chosen one. You are Eve. Everything. You are the keeper of the dead and the savior of the living. Sound great, right? You are the hero of the world. No, it is not. It's just pain you feel. Death is never painless, you know. It always hurts. You know what way to die is the worst. Burned to death, you can feel your skin slowly burning off your body. You can even smell your own flesh as it burns. then you would normally just faint and not feel anything as the chosen one. You can't just faint, you feel everything to the last second. And let me tell you, it really fucking hurts and it fucks you up mentally. In the end, you are still a human being. So now you know, and I am saying goodbye with this. I can't take it anymore. I need to go home now. I will have to wait till the new chosen one finds them. Why box with my blood inside it? Then I will be able to pass and rest in peace. Habeo Emeritus. Story 6, Blue Light. A bomb went off in the city. It happened on Monday. Today is Thursday. My dad was there. He hasn't come back yet. I've been sitting at the window every day waiting for him to come home. Mom says the bomb interrupted the electric grid in the city, so there's been barely any news about it. Our neighbor's son is a meteorologist stationed outside the city limits, and he told his father who told us. The bomb was the biggest he'd ever seen. He saw a flash of blue light fr outside the window and threw himself to the ground. He counted to 5 because it was his job to record the phenomenon. At 5 the windows exploded into the room and heat like a fool. Rains rushed over him. His father says he managed to call from an emergency line in the station. He's wounded but okay. Dad was supposed to come home Monday night. Mom has been very quiet for the last few days. She doesn't say much at breakfast and only gives me an "I love you" at bedtime on her way out of the room. I only cry then, in the dark. This morning, I stare out the window, hoping by some miracle I'd see him walking down the street and turn onto our walkway leading up to the house, smiling and waving at me. My heart leaps every time someone walks by. Mom comes in behind. "Emmy, go upstairs and get ready for school, please." I turn around in my chair, but staring out the window is not going to change anything. Now go. I leave the window, feeling as though he won't come home unless I was there watching for him. Every day it's gotten harder and harder to sit there at the window and watch. I have a need to run outside and look for him, to ask Eve, a person in every store, if they've seen him anywhere at all, because I need him. I need him home to wake me up in the morning and help me with homework and tell me jokes at the dinner table and BTH. Here for me when I need advice or just to talk and not be crushed under a mountain of concrete with pulverized shoulders that used to hold me during parades and let me press my face into them when I needed to cry. I sob while I put my books into my bag, quietly, because I haven't heard Mom cry and she won't hear me cry. The front door swings open from downstairs. Hello. For 3 days I dreamed of that voice. Dad, I half scream and rush to the landing, looking down over the banister through vision obscured by tears. He was looking up at me. I couldn't tell if he was smiling or no. But I rushed down the steps and towards him with a hysterical laugh of relief. I stopped dead when I came closer to him. His face was a deep red and covered in blisters. His arms looked burned out, like they were held over a stove. His shirt was torn and covered in soot and maybe blood. Dad, what? It's all right, he said. Come give me a hug. I sprint to him and dive into his arms. He gives a little cry of pain. Oh God, Dad, I'm sorry. I mutter, trying to pull away. It's all right, he says. I'm just a bit sore, that's all. He looks up behind me. Mom's been standing there, watching us. She's finally crying. Didn't you know I'd be back? Dad says to her, smiling. She rushes over, and the three of us are hugging together. It was a long time before we broke up. What happened to you? Asks Mom. Dad looks at me tentatively. His face is suddenly grave, pale. His eyes look. Did they look scared? I think it's best if you leave while I talk to your mother. Don't you have school in a bit? Go get ready for me. I nod, turning away reluctantly. As I head upstairs, I hear him say, let's sit down. I need some water. I return to my book bag with a different set of tears in my eyes. I knew he would be fine. I just knew it. Why would I ever think my dad could get hurt? He had to come home, and he did. That's all there was to it. I heard a gasping moan from downstairs. I turn towards the door and stop when I remember that he told me to leave them alone. Another moan floats through the door. My curiosity gets the best of me. I creep around the door frame and down the hall to the landing, leaning against the wall with my ear between the banisters. They couldn't see me around the corner, but their words were clear as day. Just got to the hospital to inspect the facilities. It was around 8 in the morning. I was following the chief of staff to his office when it sounded like a cannon went off right beside me. The wall next to me exploded. Mom made another sound like I had heard from upstairs. I couldn't see her, but her face was plain as day. She must have been LK White. I was turning pale too. I found myself wondering how in the world he could have survived that. Dad continued. I woke up sometime later. I really have no idea how much later. It was pitch black where I was and hot, deathly hot. I put my hands out and felt metal as hot as a grill. 3 walls of metal and one of rock. I remember asking myself if I was dead or captured or something. I started scratching and clawing at the rock to get out. It looked like I was in some sort of enclosure, like a space just big enough for my body. I had yanked enough rock away to pull myself out. I looked back and saw I was under a steel desk that had been thrown right side up on top of me. It was the perfect cover. My skin felt horribly sunburned, and the air was so hot it was like sitting in a sauna. I looked around and saw I was standing on seconds to come in. Rain was coming down. Except it wasn't rain, it was black and tarry. I climbed over the walls of the hospital. I was so thirsty, so groggy. I knew there would be no running water, but we were close to the bay, and I crossed a river to get to the hospital. So I started making my way back there. I was so lucky to be close to the city limits. I doubt anyone in downtown survived the collapse of those huge buildings. But almost every building here was destroyed, and the ones that weren't were burning. At first I didn't see a single person. Then I came across a mother and her baby under an awning of concrete. It was hellish, the woman. Her skin was peeling off in sheets. Her eyes were a bright gold white. They must have been bleached from looking at the explosion. Her baby was charred black. It looked rubbery in her arms. She was staring straight ahead. The skin hanging off her arms was translucent, like the wings of a fly. The shock on her face made me nauseous. I called out to her, but she didn't hear me. I doubted that she would. She was probably deaf from being outside for the blast. I closed my eyes. What he was saying scared me. I didn't want to be here, but I was frozen against the wall, helpless to hear. As I got closer to the riverside, I saw more and more people, some on their feet, some lying like rag dolls, some whose body parts were just barely sticking out of the rubble. The people on the ground, were so burned they were swelling up. They looked like black rubber dolls. When I got to the river, he stopped, choking on his words. Mom was dead silent now. I could imagine her dread as keeping her from even moaning. My heart is hammering now. As I listen, I see with clarity the ghastly sights my father had seen. The images burned into my mind's eye. I saw hundreds, literally hundreds of corpses covering the bank so if the river piled on top of one another, trying to get one last drink. There were corpses floating down the river, too. I saw a woman pass who looked like she was wearing a long white cloth belt that was billowing out behind her. I got closer and realized it was her intestines whitened by the water. On the other side of the river, there were these large mounds piled up against the ruined walls facing the explosion, and people were standing around them, pulling them apart. They were looking for their loved ones inside mounds of human beings. I saw children there, on their knees, screaming into the mounds. "Daddy, are you in there? Mommy, please come out." I stood there, behind the bodies bordering the river like black and red sandbags, watching people flow by, watching people dig into mountains of humans, watching people collapse where they stood, watching people with burst-out organs try and fit them back in, watching a man with eyes burned out of his head as he asked, "Is anyone there? Please kill me." I stood there under the gray sky, watching all this through smoke as black rain fell. And you know what I realized? I realized that in all my thoughts, all my dreams of what hell might look like, I could never have imagined anything like this. I guess I didn't need to. Though hell came to me, hell came to earth. I stood for a long, long time after that. My back was still against the wall. The grotesque images swam in front of me, as if at the end of a black tunnel, of the women writhing, the men pleading for death, and the corpses grinning up at me as they floated by. My shirt peeled off the wall as I ran to the bathroom. I bolted to the toilet and promptly vomited into the basin. My eyes felt like they would burst under the pressure of my undigested breakfast. The monsters I picture when I swing my closet door open or look under my bed from on top expecting to see a set of dripping white teeth over two glaring red eyes, those monsters are nothing now. Nothing compared to these horrors. These people, they're real, and the ones who caused them this. There couldn't be anything more evil. Hell in the world. I kneeled, dazed, over the bowl for minutes. I came out of it only when Mom knocked on the door and told me in a quiet voice that I would be late for school if I didn't hurry. 35 minutes later, I was sitting in class before the teacher came in. Before I had left the house, I hugged my dad, who had fallen asleep on the couch where he sat. His face looked very lined, very tired under his blisters. He looked older. I hated thinking of him that way, but I couldn't stop myself. I came out of it slightly, and the teacher came in at 11 o'clock, shushing the tearing class. He wrote the month and then 9th on the board before turning to us. "Kids," he said, "I know things have been scary these last couple days, but we all need to remember to keep calm, okay? It's especially important to obey your curfews and not to cause a ruckus of any type. I'm talking, of course, about the incident that happened last night. It seems someone has defaced the school sign outside. You may have seen it on your way in this morning. Now, I hope the perpetrator is not part of my class, but if he or she is here, I ask that they come forward and confess. It doesn't have to be now, but it has to be today. I had seen the sign. The janitor was out there as we came in, scrubbing at the sign. It was faint, but we could still see the W, Ord Sucks, underneath Nagasaki Elementary School. Outside the windows, a blue light explodes across the sky. Story 7, Beer's Remorse. When I saw the car for sale on Craigslist, I was shocked. Not only was it a good price, decent shape, and reliable brand, but it was custom built for someone who didn't have legs. Both of my legs had to be amputated due to a childhood illness. Obviously, it made driving a lot more complicated. I learned to drive on a specially equipped car that had the gas and brake powered through a hand crank instead of pedals. I drove that thing for a decade before it was stolen. I still think about those bastards who took it. I immediately called the owner. He said he had the car altered for his daughter, who became a paraplegic after a car accident the year before. Even though he had it altered, his daughter refused to use the car and had given up driving altogether. He said the car itself was bringing her a lot of sadness, so he wanted to get rid of it as soon as possible. We arranged to meet that afternoon. I could not contain my excitement. I took out my favorite prosthetics, the ones my girlfriend, Dana, had painted corfish on, and fastened them in. Usually cars that were built for someone like me cost way too much to even fathom buying. Being disabled in this society is expensive. But this goo, why was selling the car for 1K? I would have given him 3 times as much and laughed it off. 2:00 finally arrived, and I bussed over to the seller's place. It was in a nice neighborhood just 20 minutes or so from downtown. I got a few stares from my fellow passengers, but I was used to that. It's not every day you see a guy with fish on his legs. I got off a little early and walked to the house. Which house it was, because the car was sitting right out front. It was beautiful. I walked up so quickly I almost didn't see the woman sitting on a picnic table in the yard. She was older than me, maybe in her early 40s, with white hair. She wore a thick black coat. I waved to her, but she didn't take her eyes off the car. "Hey, I am Finn. I'm here about the cars." Slowly she shifted her gaze over to me. The look on her face was one of fear. "There is something living in the back seat," she said softly. "Sorry." What? I was sure I had heard wrong. "There is something alive in the back seat." She opened her mouth as if she were to say more, but then shut it and turned back to the car. A man rushed out of the house. "You must be Finn. I'm so sorry I didn't see you walk up." "It's no problem." I rubbed my arm awkwardly. "Hey, so she said there was something living in the back seat. Is there like a rodent problem or something?" The man turned around and saw the woman. "Oh shit, Jane is out here. I'm really sorry. She isn't right in the head." He ran over to her. "I told you to stay inside. He deserves to know what's living back there." She shrieked at him. He grabbed her and hoisted her up in his arms. Over his shoulder he called, "I'll be right back. Jane needs some rest." As she was carried into the house, she screamed, "Beware." It took my legs, but it wants a life. When they both disappeared behind the door, I strongly considered bolting out of there, which would have been hard to do, since I didn't have my running prosthetics on. Jane must be the daughter he mentioned in his ad, considering the fact that she didn't walk. For some reason I had pictured her younger. THIS situation was really weird. It didn't sit right with me, but on the other hand, the car was such a good price. The man came back outside with a bit of sweat on his brow. Sorry about that. I thought she was inside. Jane is, well, she just has a few extra screws loose at the moment. Is she okay? Looking back, that was a stupid question, but it was the only thing I could think of. The accident really got to her. Even though it's been a while, she can't let go of it, he sighed. As you heard, she's even invented some sort of thing living in the back seat. She's convinced this is what caused her accident, not the fact she was drinking too much. I'm so sorry, I said quietly. He shrugged, but enough about the past. The car is in really good shape. After the accident, I had the entire thing rewired. Sorry, but are you saying this was the car that she was driving when she crashed? He shuffled, looking away from me. Yeah, guess I should have mentioned it in the ad, but like I said, there's nothing wrong with the car. No damage from the accident at all. I added this special hand cranks for her. It drives perfectly. Normally I would be asking a lot more, but I just need it gone. I think for Jane to heal it needs to. D with someone else. I took a test drive and he wasn't lying. The car was perfect. If not for the mileage, you might have thought it was brand new. Driving again was amazing. For the past year, I had to rely completely on the bus or Dana to get me anywhere. This would change my life, despite the strangeness of Jane and her comments. I bought the car. The man was so happy he nearly teared up. You won't regret this, he said joyfully. I drove to the DMV, got the plates, and felt a freedom I missed dearly. As on for wheels again, I headed straight to Dana's. She was going to be so excited for me. With this new car, maybe I could try and find a better job and finally get the money for an engagement ring. The thought of PR opposing made me even happier. Dana was perfect for me in every way. She was strong when I was scared. She was calm when I would freak out. We balanced each other. I was head over heels for H. I knew that everything was going to work out. That's when I heard the rumble. It was quiet at first, like a typical car sound. But as I kept driving, it started to change. It began to sound more like a peculiar whisper. With every bump, the whispering was louder. My first reaction was annoyance. I thought the car was in perfect condition, but clearly something was wrong. I figured I'd take it to the mechanic tomorrow. I spent the night with Dana, going over our dreams for future. She fit so nicely in the crook of my arm. I dated a few girls here and there, but Dana was my first real relationship. Not only did she not care about my amputations, she celebrated me and my disability. We ran a marathon together last year. I never would have finished without her encouragement. I couldn't wait to marry her. In the morning it was hard to get out of bed. Dana was still asleep, curled up beside me. I kissed her forehead. I had decided that I would take the car in early to be looked at and then get a start on the job hunt. I put on my everyday prosthetics and headed out. I was halfway to the body shop when the rumble started again. I rolled my eyes, but before too long I noticed something odd in the rearview mirror. Every time I glanced in that direction, something red flashed behind my seat. It was like a shadow. It disappeared right when I caught sight of it. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I couldn't help but think of Jane. There is something living the back seat. At the mechanic, I watched as they did a thorough inspection of the car. They checked under the hood, in the seats, everywhere. They couldn't find anything that made a rumbling noise. In fact, they said the car was in better shape than it should be for its age. I pushed back a little, asking again if there was any way an animal could be living in the car somewhere. Their exact answer: unless it's invisible, there's nothing living in your car. I felt embarrassed. Of course, there was nothing in my car. I was being stupid. Jane was just a woman who was deeply affected by her accident. I headed back home. I hit the first red light and some. Ethan pulled my hair. I swung my head around, but there was nothing. My shoulders got tense. I looked in the rearview mirror. The red flash bled into my seat. I kept staring, trying to catch another glimpse. The car behind me honked. I looked forward and realized the light was green. Reluctantly, I went ahead. Not even a minute went by before I felt nails on my neck. I turned around, but again nothing was there. I tried to focus on driving. "You're freaking out," I whispered. The whisper's reply: out, out, out. I looked in the rearview mirror and saw what looked like a sick red arm sticking out behind my seat. It recoiled in an instant. Suddenly there was a resounding crash. The airbag slapped me back to the seat. My neck pinned sideways. I screamed, but my lungs were calm. Pressed, I must have rear-ended the car in front of me. It was my fault. I hadn't been paying attention. My imagination had nearly gotten me killed. The airbag deflated quickly, and the Pollock he were on the scene. I had completely smashed the car in front of me. Luckily, there was no one in the back seat of their car. Strangely, my car had no damage, not even a scratch. I realized slowly that I had only just gotten the car and hadn't bought insurance yet. Needless to say, I spent a lot of time apologizing and talking with the police. When the incident was finished and we had all run out of things to say, it was time for me to drive home. I dreaded it. Clearly, Jane had gotten into my head. I was seeing things, hearing things. I felt like I was going crazy. Even while I was talking to the police, I felt insane. They asked what happened to cause the crash. I had to pause and decide whether or not to say something. In my back seat was talking to me, and I saw a red arm, and I wasn't paying attention to the road. Instead, I just told them the last part. I wasn't paying attention to the road. Before getting into the car, I called Dana. I told her about the crash, but left out the thing in the back seat. She told me to come over. Her apartment was actually closer, so I agreed. Plus, some snuggle time could make this all go away. Hesitantly, I got into the car. I inspected the back seat as thoroughly as I could. There was nothing there, nothing wrong with it. Slowly, I pulled into traffic. I drove as slow as possible. The people around me were not happy with my speed, and I got honked at quite a few times. But I didn't care. I was not going to endanger any more lives. I spent the entire time in the car in a tense, statue-like pose. Lines of my muscles were ready for anything. I realized my hands were shaking a little. "Stop it," I told myself. "You're making this all up." It was a miracle that I made it to Dana's without incident. I almost cried when I pulled in front of her apartment building. She was outside waiting for me, a concerned look on her beautiful face. I got out of the car and went to hug her. She backed away, worried. "What is it?" I asked. She was looking at the car. "Who is that?" She pointed. I followed her finger with my eyes. There, sitting in the back seat with its face pressed against the ass, was a figure, a red human-like figure. One large eye was open, and nearly digging into the window, it raised an arm as if to wave before completely disappearing. I felt like fainting, but Dana, being the purrs on she is, turned to me. Her chin was squared and she was angry. We're going to that bastard who sold you this thing and getting your goddamn money back.